speaker. Our second speaker is Mrs. Rosa Soler. She is a master in civil engineer from the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia. She has several years of experience in the transportation sector, working first on roads and later in the railway sector when she moved to ADIF. So as I said earlier, the Spanish Railway Infrastructure Manager in Spain. Okay, Spanish, Spain, yeah, where she is currently in charge of the track technology department. She has participated in numerous European working groups for the elaboration of standards and regulations at international level. She is currently the Spanish delegate in the Railway Committee of the European Committee for Standardization and the representative of ADIF in the Track Experts Group of the International Union of Railways. Rosa?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks, Tonette, for your introduction. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Thanks, Tonette, for your introduction. And thank you to YOLAB organization for giving me the opportunity to talk about the resilience of infrastructure from the perspective of the infrastructure owner. I briefly want to start with some information about ADIF, the infrastructure manager which I belong. ADIF is a public company that owns and manages the Spanish railway infrastructure and has more than 15,100 kilometers of rail network and almost 1,500 stations. It covers the whole life cycle of the infrastructure, from the planning to the traffic management, covering also the design, the construction, and the renewal. My presentation is much more general than Mr. Bless, because I'm trying to give a whole perspective of the critical infrastructure. I'm not a geotechnical expert. I am only civil track expert, so maybe I'm not as technical as you need. I'll try to do my best. So I first wanted to explain what critical infrastructures are. Critical infrastructures, as Tonette said before, are assets, networks, and facilities in the sectors of transport, urban, water, and energy, essential for public health, safety, security, and economic productivity. Therefore, their long-term availability and reliability are required. As I work in the field of transport, I will focus my presentation on transport. I'm sorry for the colleagues that belong to water or energy, but I think all my comments can be extended to the rest of the sectors. And the key question, what's resilience? That's especially dedicated to Yanis. What resilience is? Although Tonette explained it before. Resilience in terms of infrastructures is the ability of the critical infrastructure systems to absorb, adapt to, or rapidly recover from a potentially disruptive event. What disruptive events? Also called disasters. So human-induced disasters or natural disasters. These are some examples of disruptive events. Those disasters cost Europe more than 9 billion euros a year, and this figure will increase in the following years. As all of these are disasters, usually the legal and strategic framework focus on natural disasters related to climate change, maybe because that's our main concern, social concern, maybe because they can be more or less predictive. So I will focus in my presentation on climate change disruptive events, although any comment can be extended to other kind of pressures on infrastructures. I thought that Mr. Bless was going to go in depth in the legal and strategic framework, so but I have seen that you only focus on the earthquakes. So I'll try to give you some brief description of the legal framework. From the United Nations perspective, the resilience is in line, as Tonet said, with the Sustainable Development Goal number 9, build resilient infrastructure. And of course, with the Paris Agreement on climate change that was signed in 2016, that means a global framework to avoid the climate change and was ratified by the European Union. And at European level, last year, the European Union adopted a strategy on adaptation to climate change. And one of the main goals was adapt to the impacts of climate change. So that topic is very, very important for the European strategy. And also last year was published the European Climate Law that among its objectives is also the resilience to the potential adverse impacts of the climate change. Therefore, all the nations in Europe have their own plans for adaptation to climate change. These are some examples from Germany, Switzerland, or Spain. And with this framework, from this framework arises the concept of climate resilient infrastructures that the OECD defines as infrastructures that are planned, designed, built, and operated in a way that anticipates, prepares for, and adapts to changing climate conditions. That's our main goal, having climate resilient infrastructures. And what can we do as infrastructure owners? So I think we can do many things, but I have tried to summarize it in 3 big points. Participation in strategic research projects. From the owner's perspective, participation in strategic research projects, mainstreaming climate resilience at project investment level, and revision of climate-proof enduring operation and maintenance. The second one is regarding to new infrastructures, and the third one, operation, regarding to existing infrastructures. Let's look at these 3 points more in depth. The first one, research projects. Besides GeoLab, that is a research project, infrastructure managers participate in several research projects. I have brought some examples. For example, from the transport perspective, the project EWENT, extreme weather impacts on European networks of transport, is already concluded and assesses the impacts of extreme weather events on the European Union transport system. Another example from the railways perspective is the research project ARISC, Adaptation of Railway Infrastructure to Climate Change. This project is still ongoing and many infrastructure managers are participating. The second point, project investment level. Those documents are some examples of how the infrastructure managers give importance to address the resilience of infrastructures. For example, the first one is a study that was conducted in Spain about the climate change adaptation needs of the transport network. And with this, after this study, we could identify the priority projects in terms of resilience of infrastructures. But at the bottom side of the slide, you can see a standard from ADIF. It's a recently published methodology for assessing risk and adaptation to climate change in projects. This norm tries to help the infrastructure manager to better design infrastructures in terms of resilience. Finally, in terms of projects, we have to take climate-based decisions at the investment stage, and of course, trying to use as better as possible the European funds. For that purpose, we also need some decision support tools to be used in the project evaluations. For example, here you have an example. The European Climate Adaptation Platform is a platform, a database that contains lots of tools, case studies, and guidelines for project makers to better design resilient infrastructures. And finally, the third point, the management. It's essential, the revision of climate proofing during operation and maintenance of existing infrastructures. Today, we have talked a lot about existing infrastructures. I think it's our main goal, what to do with them, because the time, the conditions, the technical framework is poor with respect with the new infrastructures. Here I bring some examples. In ADIF, for example, we have a master plan to combat climate change, especially aimed at existing infrastructures. And of course, we need to develop new technologies, new specific tools to help in the maintenance and in the management. For example, flood detection or rockfall and landslides detection by means of distributed fiber optic sensing. We can talk about this later in the panel discussion, but I think that the sensing is a good tool for infrastructure manager to help us to have more resilient infrastructures. Challenge. There are lots of challenges we are facing, but I have summarized it in 4. The uncertainty about the future, because there's a wide range of possible scenarios in the future. Policy misalignments that unfortunately can discourage innovative initiatives. The time horizons, because the decision makers have to take short-term decisions, but thinking about long-term benefits, and that's a difficult question. And information availability, because we need high accuracy data for decision making. And how can geoengineers community contribute? For example, in time horizons, using your tests, your models, your equipment to accelerate the natural processes in order to simulate in real conditions in the best conditions the reality. Or information availability with medium, large, or real scale tests that help us to take good decisions. Finally, this, I think it's obvious, but I wanted to remind it. If policymakers, infrastructure owners, academia, and industry, of course, small and medium enterprise, if we don't work together and in line, we will not be able to progress. So, of course, infrastructure managers need the rest of the sectors to get real resilient infrastructures. And to summarize my presentation, resilience is a key aspect for critical infrastructures. There's a complex regulatory framework in constant development. CI owners increasingly include resilience in decision making. The geoengineers community have a key role on this process. And of course, we need the support of industry and academia because it's essential for the goals achievement. And thank you for your attention.
Great, Rosa. Thank you very much. Quick questions?